Welcome everyone to another episode of That Weems Guy. Joining us tonight will be the show's production agent, I guess, is Freddie Blish, because Freddie has been booking a lot of interviews here lately. So, Freddie, thank you very much for the connections you've been helping us make.
Well, thanks for inviting me on, Lee. When you invited me on, I'm like, well, I'm a D-list celebrity. I don't know why you want to talk to me. All I know is I want to get more hits than John Hearn. That's all.
Well, you've passed the test right there. You've passed the test.
You can tell I've listened to a few of your podcasts.
Absolutely. Oh, he's going to love that because he downloads the episodes as soon as they hit on Monday morning and listen to them as he goes for a run on Monday morning. Right. And so I'm going to be anxiously waiting for the text message when he gets that. And I taught him.
He's going to be out here in Phoenix in August, and I'm planning to take his there are two lecture classes. I'm planning to take them.
I was in Michigan teaching this past weekend, and there are several people who've listened to the show. And one of them was like, "I really enjoy all the banter picking on John Hearn," and I was like, "It's getting so bad that I'm starting to feel bad about it. I'm not going to stop it. I'm just starting to feel bad about it." So I tell both he and John Murphy that they're the older brothers that I didn't really want, but I kind of like.
Yeah, what's interesting. I'll apologize to the audience. I'm here at Gunsite teaching a class this week, a class for some military primary marksmanship instructors, and so I'm in what's called the bridal suite of the gunsmithy. Now, this was the house built for Robbie Barkman that has the gunsmith at shop attached, and now the living quarters are instructor quarters, and I'm in Pat Rogers always called the bridal suite, was the master bedroom. And anyway, so the lighting in here isn't the best, and so if I fade in and out or look dark and then it brightens up, I apologize.
Well, that just adds to the ambiance of the whole thing that you're there at Gunsite in the smithy.
Yes, yeah. And a quick aside, you mentioned John Murphy's name, and I've known Murph since 1994. Yeah, he was when I was a company commander, he was our battalion intelligence officer. Yeah,
cool.
Known him that long. Yeah,
wow,
great people. He was a rock star then.
I just wish John would come out of his shell. Yeah, he's just so mild-mannered, and I just wish he would come out of his shell. And I'll tell a funny John Murphy anecdote here is when I do my safety briefing, I talk about the fact that if you drop a firearm, just let it go. Just let it fall, rather than, because when you start trying to grab at it and fingers go into trigger guards and everything. And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to picture John Murphy as that little Disney princess singing "Let It Go, Let It Go." And once you picture that, you can never get it out of your mind.
I've hosted Murph a number of times for his street encounter classes, which is an awesome class.
Right.
And he does that whole Frozen "Let It Go, Let It Go."
Yeah, I've seen him do it, so that's why I use him.
So I have stolen it from him, and I do that here, when we teach the Gunsite, and I said, let it go, unless it's a SIG 320, then let it go and run.
At the state training facility here in Georgia, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, an instructor fumbled a draw and tried to catch the pistol and discharged a round, and the round hit a student and another instructor.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's a thing.
It is a real thing. Absolutely, it is.
Yeah. Well, if you would tell the audience who you are.
Freddie Blish. I grew up in Vermont. Actually, a sixth generation Vermonter. My family lived in Vermont before it was a state. Actually, when it was Republic of Vermont, Vermont became the 14th state. It was a very bedrock, hard, conservative state up until about the late 80s, early 90s. And then as we called them, the Flatlanders, the people from New York City, Boston, Connecticut started moving up, and the politics started changing because, Bernie Sanders is from Bronx or Brooklyn, and Howard Dean's from Long Island. None of them are what we call real Vermonters. And unfortunately, it's turned Vermont into the Oregon of the East Coast. But I grew up in Vermont, except for 2 years. My dad moved us out here to Arizona. My grandfather, my namesake, his dad, had emphysema, And so late 60s, early 70s, they had to move to Arizona, Wickenburg, for health reasons. And when my grandfather was getting near the end, my dad wanted to be there for his mom. And so I went to 7th and 8th grade here in Wickenburg, Arizona. And so Arizona's always been kind of my second home. So when I finally kind of moved here, retired here, you know, it didn't feel out of place because I have an aunt and two uncles that live out here. So that's kind of my background there. From there, I did finish high school in Vermont. Then I went to the nation's oldest private military college, Norwich University, which is in Vermont. Originally founded in Norwich, Vermont, but then they had a rivalry with Dartmouth, and they supposedly some of the students at Dartmouth came over, and some of the shenanigans accidentally burned down the barracks at Norwich University's barracks in Norwich, and so they moved to the Geographic Center of Vermont in Northfield, and so I went to Norwich University in my freshman year. Originally was looking, wanted to be a pilot, so I was like thinking like, oh yeah, like Air Force, but there was a handful of Marine officers that were graduated from Norwich through the platoon leader commissioning program. And as a freshman, a rook, they just stood out. And I said, that's the route I want to go. And during high school, I'd read the book Short Timers, which the movie Full Metal Jacket is based on. And I, of course, was like, yeah, I'd like to be a Marine, but, I didn't know how Marine officers were created and didn't know enough about Marine aviators and stuff. And when I found that out, I went that route, and everything was good until they tested my eyes, and I have 20/15 perfect vision left, or my right eye. My left eye was 20/20, but I was like a slight astigmatism, and I was like 0.25% outside the waiverable limit. And I'm like, well, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to still be Marine contract? I said, yeah, I'll go ground. And so then I went that route as an officer of the Marine Corps. And I was at the basic school when you go through and you pick out the MOS you want to do. And I had an environmental engineering degree. So I thought, well, my family was, oh yeah, do it, be a combat engineer. And I'm like, but I really want to be infantry. And they're like, no, you use your degree. And so I went combat engineer, and I don't regret it. I had a great career, but my temperament was more always infantry. So one of those, few regrets in life. I probably should have gone infantry, but my life would have been a lot different. So that is what it is. And then, of course, when I was at First Combat Engineer Battalion, when I was a company commander, is when I met Murph, and Murph's background is really interesting because he was actually in the Army National Guard first. And if I remember right, and Murph can correct us, but I remember Murph telling me that he had actually been a second lieutenant in the Army National Guard in Michigan. But when he came into the Marine Corps, because he only had an associate's degree, they're like, no, you got to be enlisted. And so he was a sergeant, and we needed a second lieutenant as our intel officer. And our battalion executive officer, Major Jim Hill, was awesome. He was a great XO. He calls division, and he's like, look, we rate an intel officer. We need one. And they're like, well, we don't have a second lieutenant, but we've got something better. We got this guy, Sergeant John Murphy. And that's how we met Murph. And Murph was a rock star even then. And, Murph, of course, eventually got out of the Marine Corps, went, to where he went and did, rock star stuff there. And I met Gary Greco through Murph, actually. Right. And, Murph was Gary would do these things up at Fort Meade in Maryland, the weapon craft, once a month. And through Murph, I started going up there and, shooting with Gary and Alan Booth and, a lot of guys, mostly Marine, SF, Secret Service, alphabet agency guys, and really, really good stuff. And for me, when I, as an officer, or actually any Marine, we'll have our primary MOS, and then we do what we call B billet. And as officers, you either go to the drill field to babysit drill instructors, or you'll go recruiting, or you get to do a cool B billet. And I got lucky, and I did the Marine Security Forces. And so I did, and the difference is you have Marine Security Guard, they're they guard the embassies and they work for State Department. Marine Security Forces was a CNO asset, and we did anti-terrorism. And so I went to Marine Security Forces in Panama, and then we were assigned a collateral mission also to reinforce American embassies in Latin America. And we worked with U.S. Special Operations Command South. Actually worked with the 160th a lot. They were the guys that would do our insertions. And the shooting packages that we would go through were pretty intense. And I remember when I went through the Marine Security Force Supervisors course and then through the Close Quarter Battle Trainer course, the name Bob Young kept being brought up. And so I knew of him. And then when I came to Gunsite for my first time, July of 2001, and I took the 250 pistol class, it was because Colonel Cooper had come back to Gunsite. Buzz Mills had bought it, and he started hosting. Jeff would teach 2 or 3 classes a year, and they were called the Master's class. And I wanted to sit at the foot of the Master. And I'm going through the 250 class, and I went up to lunch at Bob Young's house one day, and I said, "Sir, is it my, perception, or is it like the Marine Security Force Supervisors course and the Marine Security Force course for the young Marines? It mirrors all the 250 stuff." And he's like, "Absolutely." He goes, "When General Gray had tasked them to change the Marine barracks, Marine debt, all over the Marine Security Forces, they sent him and Chris Bourne, who, interestingly enough, Chris Bourne and I served together at Marfor Pac later. I didn't, no, actually, I served with Chris before that. I served with Chris before I went to Gunsite, but I met Chris, and he said, yeah, they went to all the shoot, Bill Rogers, Shaw, Gunsite, and he said Gunsite's curriculum was a curriculum that met the Marine Corps' needs for what they wanted to do. And Force Recon had already been sending guys at Gunsite, the old guys, Delta, LAPD Metro D Platoon. A lot of the early SEAL teams were all sending guys through Gunsite back in the early 80s, mid 80s. And so the curriculum here really carried over well for military law enforcement training. And yeah, Bob said that, no, absolutely. We basically stole Gunsite's curriculum and brought it back to the Marine Corps. And he goes, that's why it seems so familiar to you. And it did. It was because it all translated. He goes, the stuff from the handgun to the shotgun to the carbines to the subguns, it all carried over. And it was all very applicable. So anyways, as my career went on, eventually, after 9/11, I was at headquarters Marine Corps when 9/11 occurred. Interestingly enough, on that, we had stood up a urban breaching course. We called it the Advanced Urban Mobility Breaching Course for the Marine Corps Combat Engineers. We had worked with the Marine Corps EOD guys that were already running a dynamic entry course, because with the Marine Force Reconnaissance community, when they were deployed on a Marine Expeditionary Unit, Special Operations Capable, and they were tasked to do an extraneous hostage rescue, they had EOD Marines with them to help deal with IEDs as well as do the breaching. So the Marine Corps EOD guys were all doing the breaching, but we realized that we were going to need this for urban environments. In my experience, both in Panama and elsewhere, I'm like, surgical shooting is going to become a priority in the next battlefield, and we need to be able to do urban breaching. And I was the Ockfield as a major. Those of us that are majors in staff positions, we jokingly refer to ourselves as the Iron Majors. But I realized that we needed to get this stood up, and we were able to get it stood up. So I attended either the first or the second one as the Ockfield sponsor just to go through it and see what it was about. So I'm at that course in Quantico, and I called my boss up at headquarters Marine Corps just to check in because he was on a break. And he's like, yeah, he goes, plane just hit one of the towers. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Was it foggy, rainy, whatever? No, it was clear. It was, And then as I'm talking to him, he says, oh, another plane just hit the tower. I'm like, holy shit. So we knew it was a terrorist attack at that point. Well, everything starts locking down, and my wife just happened to be at Henderson Hall, headquarters of the Marine Corps, that day for some kind of spouse class or something. And the plane hit the Pentagon. And of course, Marines are running through Henderson Hall and, like, stay, don't move, stay here, blah, blah, blah. My wife is like, no, you don't understand. I'm going home. No, you're safer here. She goes, no, you don't understand. They're attacking you. They're not attacking me. I'm going home. They're not going to fly a plane into my house. And so she gets home, took her several hours, of course. And everybody's calling her like, hey, is Freddie okay? And she's like, Freddie's down in Quantico. I was there. And so anyways, a year later, I make it back to the fleet. We spin up to go over to Kuwait and then into Iraq. And after we do OAF 1, and I'm just observing the training, and I'm just like, our marksmanship program, everything was still geared on competing at Camp Harry. I mean, the combat marksmanship program outside of the force community, the reconnaissance community, the Marine Security Force community, is still very much kind of competing on a one-way range, not fighting on a two-way range. And so I really started advocating hard to get Marines to Gunsite, to high-risk personnel course in Quantico, to wherever we could get Marines to start getting them focused on fighting on a two-way, train to trainer stuff, get them, these guys trained up so they can come back and train our Marines. And about I want to say it was around 2005 that finally the Marine Corps started spinning up a combat marksmanship program. And we had already had one going at my unit and getting Marines ready for that. And we stepped on some toes doing it, and I made some enemies in Quantico when I did it, but it was the right thing to do. I got, some people kind of upset at me, which probably didn't help my career. I know it didn't help my career at all in that regard, but it was the right thing to do. And it was getting those Marines, because at that point it was like, look, we found out in Iraq is like, they didn't want to fight us. They wanted to kill us. And that meant more IEDs. That meant more, close range engagement stuff, all of the things that we needed to be doing. And those, sending Marines to, places like Gunsite was imperative to start getting them there. So after I retired from the Marine Corps, I then worked for Aimpoint for 4 years as director of military business development for Aimpoint. Interesting note on that is that Pat Rogers, I took a 223 carbine class at Gunsite in May or April of 2004. And I remember going with iron sights, and it was John Farnham, Gary Greco, all of us at that time were like, if it has batteries, we can't trust our lives to it, And so I'm in this class, and Pat's the instructor, and it was, during the night shoot, and I was still on this thing about not trusting anything with batteries. And finally, Pat looks at me and he goes, Freddie, you have batteries for your white light, right? And like, yeah, you have spare batteries too, right? I'm like, yeah. So what's the big freaking deal? Use the other word, because Pat, about carrying a spare battery for your, for an aim point. And I'm like, okay, So a year later, I come back for the 5.56 carbine class. Now I'm running an aim point. Now I'm switched on now, and so before that, it was so funny. Here I was like adamantly opposed to like aim points, and because of Pat, I ended up going to work for Aimpoint after I retired, and became a disciple, if you will, of good quality red dot sights on guns, both starting carbines, shotguns, and now handguns. Absolutely believer in that. And after Aimpoint, went to work for LaRue for about a year and a half in a State Department contract, and then worked for Ropar for 6 years. Worked for Robbie Barkman. And I'll tell you, Robbie was probably both, and I worked for some amazing officers in the Marine Corps, great guys, but Robbie rates right up there with them as a leader, and as a civilian boss, he was my best. I really enjoyed working for Robbie a lot, and he and I used to have some just amazing conversations over coffee, just about old school Gunsite stuff, and metal finishing, and just, I learned a lot from Robbie, precision rifles, all that stuff. Yeah. Wealth of
Yeah.
knowledge. So that's kind of
If if we could go back to the optics for a moment, can you talk to us about the early adoption of red dots and stuff, or any kind of the
yeah,
optics with the
it's
military?
funny. The military class I'm teaching today, I gave a little history on that, because most people don't know really the infancy of using red dots. A lot of people think it was, like late 80s, with USPSA, but actually it goes back to World War One. Collimator sights. In World War One, when they began firing long-range artillery, they needed to have, back like Civil War and else before, it was more line of sight. The guys would kind of line the guns up on what they were wanting to shoot, and it like even had sights on those cannons. Well, now they're firing howitzers, and they needed to have aiming stakes, and so they had what they call collimator sights, which would, the closest thing for people, if they're not familiar, would be like a Armisen or Trijicon OEG sight, where you have a fiber optic or a tritium that you look through a tube. You can't look through it, but you can see the fiber optic or the tritium. And then your non-dominant eye then sees the target, or in this case, the aiming stake, and the brain kind of lines them up. Well, that originated with World War One. They had collimator sights, and it progressed through World War II and Vietnam, and during the workup for the Son Tay raid in Vietnam, where Army Special Forces were going to rescue some American POWs in prison camp Son Tay, which was outside of Hanoi. And they had CIA and had imagery showing that there were prisoners there. And so they're doing a workup training down in Homestead the Air Force Base in Homestead, Florida, to kind of replicate it. They built a whole mock-up of the whole camp, and the idea was that they had C-130s would be flying. I don't know if they were Puff or if they were Spectre, if they had changed to Spectre at the time, but basically Spectre gunship C-130s who would fly the banking circles, and they would fire out White Star parachutes to illuminate so they could see during the night raid and shoot. Well, they were still having really, really bad hit rates at night, even with the flares. So one of the SF guy says, I'm reading this gun magazine. There's an ad for this site that says that, aid you in low light, no light shooting. So they bought one. It was a United Kingdom, a UK company called Normark, and the site was called a Single Point. And it was, and so they bought a couple of them, and at the time they were like $50. I think it's equivalent of $350 today. And they had some mounts made so they would fit on the carry handle, and they put them on, and they started testing them, and then they found that the hit rates improved almost 75%.
Wow.
And they started, so they bought them for everybody, and they put them up on the GAL 5s, which basically is a Car 15, but doesn't have a forward assist. Those were Air Force issue at the time, and so they put them on GAL 5s, and they had amazing success rate with them. But what they found, and I demonstrate this when I do occluded eye drills, and I just demonstrated it again today with the 8 guys I'm training, that when you have people shooting with a collimator sight, like a single point, or you block or occlude the objective lens on your optic, about 20% will have difficulty. It's a neurological thing where their brain has difficulty lining. Dominant eye sees the reticle or dot, the non-dominant eye sees a target, and their brains will have a hard time putting the images together, to the point where past 10 yards, if you're right-handed shooter and you have this problem, your rounds will literally be off the target at 10 yards. And if you were left-handed, they'll typically be off the target on the right side. And it has nothing to do with cross-eye dominance, nothing to do with it at all. And I've talked to a doctor about it, but it wasn't like, I think he was a neurosurgeon, but I really want to talk to an ophthalmologist who really, so I can understand the real reason why it's happening. But it is I've been reading medical stuff, which, for my simple marine mind just goes over my head. It's not in crayon and there's not enough pictures. So I have a hard time totally understanding it well enough to explain in a layman's terms, but it is a phenomenon that I have observed, and it's about anywhere from 10 to 20% of the students, you'll see that happen. So anyways, from the single point, Armisen, developed the OEG, and I think Trijicon bought it, and the OEG Trijicon, and then they began with the ACOG, teaching, both eyes open, or they call it the bend and aiming concept. But it really, that concept, that both eyes open, concept, that was occluded eye. That was in use long before Steve Benden put his name on it. But the aim points were developed right about the late 70s, early 80s, and they were able to develop an optic that you could see through, and the red dot was projected on the objective lens. And that really was kind of a game changer for the red dots. And the USPSA pistol shooters began adopting them and using them on pistols, and with good success. And the early tier 1 guys were using the old aim points, the Mark IIIs and others, the 3000 models, on their carbines, and they were getting good success with those. The battery life was the problem. It was you were talking 1,000-hour battery life at best, which, when you ask people, well, what's 1,000 hours, and they think about it and they're like, I don't know. But 1,000 hours, think about it. You have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So 7 times 24 will give you an idea of what, what you get. So you're looking at 1,000 hours is basically 41 days. And now, because of the advanced circuitry technology and the LEDs that Aimpoint uses, and those LEDs are made in the US, by the way, interestingly enough. Well, the optics are built in Sweden. The LEDs are made here in the US. And they're getting now, 50,000 to 80,000 hours, 5 to 8 years, or 7 years battery life, which a year is 8,760 hours. So when you say, 10 hours, now that's at a setting that theoretically you can see in daylight, but in a bright day like out here, you're going to have to bump it up a couple notches, which means your battery life is going to diminish. You're not going to get 5 years. You might get 2 or 3. But a lot of people, they January 1st, change my batteries, and they'll change the batteries out in their optics. But with a Comp M4 with a AA lithium battery, you could put that in, turn it on a brightness setting, which is setting 12 of 16, which you can easily see in daytime use. You can leave it on for 15 years. And I used to joke with the soldiers that, when I teach classes to them about it, I'm like, yeah, put a fresh AA lithium battery in there, hand it to a soldier, and, tell them to come back in 3 re-enlistments and you'll change the battery, And, but it's pretty amazing what Aimpoint has done. I mean, they're simply the most rugged, most durable, reliable optic out there for that use, which is why they've won, 3 separate military contracts where they actually competed against, other optics makers, and all the other ones who either they wouldn't hold zero past 6,000 rounds, or they fall off the gun, or the optic itself, would start wandering zeros. And whereas the aim points, they just survived, and they're the only ones that would ever make it through the all of the durability, reliability tests that the military will put them through, which is why all the contracts that were competed Aimpoint won. The ones that were awarded because of a congressional, favor, other optics would get those. But the ones where they had to compete, they never made it.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If people understood some of the stuff that went on in procurement, of items,
because a couple congressmen from a certain state will earmark, X millions of dollars for, stuff for the military, but it's got to come from their state. Oh, okay, I know who that is.
Yeah, you know sometimes by the way the bid is written who's going to get the
Yeah.
contract.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and the and I'm not talking about, you know, Trigicon products. They're a great product. They're very durable, very rugged. I wish their glass was better glass. They get their glass, I believe, at a shot house in Japan, and they could ask for, I think, for higher quality glass, but I think it's a price point thing. They realize that, you know, they you know, if they get the better quality glass, that price point's going to go up, and that could impact their sales. So I get it, but yeah, I wish their glass was better, because like the glass that Aimpoint uses come from Zeiss. They use Zeiss glass, which is why it's so good. Very, very good quality glass.
Yeah, Aimpoint makes good stuff. We've got them on all our patrol rifles, and of course, the only pistol optic we have approved right now is the RMR.
Yeah,
But we are looking at expanding that.
I run RMRs on my Glock 19 and an RMR CC on my Glock 48. I like the RMRs because of their lightweight and everything. The only downside, of course, is it's an open emitter. And, you know, I just taught a class recently where I had that, one of those guns I was using, and it was a carbine class. So I go down to a prone, I come back up, and I mean, like, all the dirt and dust is on the front of my, you know, inside the emitter and the gun, you know, so because I go to do a transition and I'm like, okay, that's a big blur. I'm seeing all the, you know, the light refracting off of the dirt and dust on the lens. I'm like, well, okay, you know.
Yeah,
But,
the one reason we're looking at expanding it is, you know, with the RMR, you do have to take the optic off to change the battery,
yes,
put it back on, do the whole zero in process and everything again. Where say something like an Acura P2,
yep,
you
yep,
just slide the battery out.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I've got an Acro P2 in my future for. I've got a SIG M17 that I use for the military classes, and I'll probably throw it on that one.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do have some of the guys asking about the Holosun products, and I know that's because
The-
of price point, but
it-
they seem to work.
There, you know what? If Frank Woods and I, and I'm sure you know Frank, and he and I are kindred spirits in this regard, and we piss a lot of people off when we say it. But no, don't get me wrong. Holosun has moved from California to Texas, so technically they're an American company. However, they use a communist Chinese party company to build their optics. They're very rugged, very. I've been watch them from their infancy, and they've come a long way. So durability, reliability, I will not knock them. I think that they're a good product, and their price point is good because it's made in China. And I'm not knocking the Chinese people. I'm knocking the Communist Chinese Party, because any technology you send over, design, any of that they're going to manufacture for you, they steal. And then the profits all go to the People's Liberation Army. So when I can, I try not to buy products that I know will fund them. As you all know, it's hard to avoid not buying stuff made in China. But when I can, I try to. And I'm not knocking Holosun for durability, reliability. And if someone says, hey, but that's what I want to run it. That's your money. You spend it where you want to. Just for me, my time when I was at Marine Forces Pacific Command, you know, this is all pre 9/11. This was literally over 20 years ago. We looked at, you know, the Communist Chinese and the People's Liberation Army. We foresaw them as our future military antagonists. I even predicted that within 20 years they would have their own version of the Monroe Doctrine for the Pacific Theater, and they're almost there. They're getting ready to declare that. So they're a little longer than I thought they were going to do it, but they've done it or getting ready to do it. And so they're a current economic, political antagonist. And I hope it doesn't happen, but they very well could be a military antagonist. I just don't want to fund them. That's just me. You know, what people do with their own money, you know, that's their decision. But that's just me. But I can't poo-poo them and say, oh yeah, they're garbage. They're not. They're a good product. They're a good, durable, reliable product. The engineers that are designing it are doing good stuff. Yeah, it's more of a political perspective that I take on that. Where I will say is that you'll hear these people talk about wanting green dots because the green is easier on the eye, and it's all true. But the reality is it's the light spectrum. Your red is on the higher end of the spectrum, closer to IR, which allows more light transference. If you want to see green, that means you got to have more lens coatings on the lens in order for the color green to refract back. And that means that you're going to have less light transference in low light, no light situations. So green is not a great color if it's going to be an optic you're going to use for like low light, no light work. Red is a much better color for that. That's one of those things a lot of people don't understand, that they're like, oh yeah, but I want a green. And I'm like, cool, have green, but just understand that it will impact your ability to see things in low light, no light through your optic because of that. Which is really interesting. I'll go back to reason why like Aimpoint and now Holosun and of course by the SIG Romeos are made in the same factory that Holosuns are made at. That what Aimpoint did is that originally, so you would have a red dot, and what it is raw light that is passing through the tube, and then all the other color spectrums pass through, and red is what reflects back to you. So the early optics, the reason their battery life was not as good is that they would use a bulb that was a large bulb, a lot of light, but they would have a membrane that be in front of it and with a hole in it that just allowed the amount of light you wanted to go through the hole to reflect back off of the objective lens. So you had all this light being used to produce just a little bit of light that was needed. And that's why your battery life wouldn't last as long. Well, what Aimpoint did is they changed the whole game when they went to their advanced circuitry technology, and they started using smaller LED lights that allowed, you no longer had this membrane there, and you only used the amount of light produced by the LED that you needed to produce the dot to reflect back to you. But that's why those dots aren't perfectly crisp circles, because it's raw light being projected there. And so that's why you'll sometimes see it more of some people based on astigmatisms or whatever, will see more of a spider or, kind of a pluming kind of dot, vice a real round crisp dot. That's the difference between, the older optics and the new ones. So that's how that's done. But because you're only using the amount of light you need, then you're not drawing as much light or power for the light. And that's why you're able to literally, basically use as much, if not even a little bit less energy than a battery sitting unused on a shelf, as it just discharges energy naturally to, for an Aimpoint, which is kind of interesting, how smart they were with that technology to develop that.
Interesting. I remember kind of the transition of when red dots first started showing up on law enforcement rifles.
Yeah.
And it's funny, in 2020, before the world ended, I took a class through the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and we were not allowed to run optics on our rifles in that class. And I'm like, it's 2020.
I know. We reached by 2015, even really, I would tell you 2011, we reached a point with red dot sights, definitely with the Aimpoints, that the likelihood of failing was that's when I would start, I'd had conversations with, Super Dave Harrington, that's Dave. And Dave is like, Freddie, I don't even run backup sights anymore. These Aimpoints are so reliable. I still run backup irons on mine. I'm just an old school guy. Right. But honestly, I can't tell you the last time I needed to use them. I really I can't.
The only, and it's not a failure because the equipment worked exactly as it was supposed to. I have had some deputies that refused to change the batteries in their Aimpoint, and one of them showed up to qualify this year, and he's like, I can't see my dot. And so I took it, and I'm looking at his rifle, and I get to monkey around with it, and I could get kind of an intermittent faint Dot to come up. I said, "Hey man, when's the last time you changed the battery?" He said, "They told us," and his response was, "They said the batteries would last 5 years."
Well,
I said, "That's not what I asked you." I said,
yeah,
"When is the last
yeah,
time you changed the battery?"
yeah,
Well, I haven't. Well, I bought the Optic, so I know how old.
yeah, yeah.
It's like, well, we're all changing the batteries in these Optics right now. And so we went, we ordered some, and we put them in because, if they're starting to go, and it's just, if that's the thing that gun people don't understand when it comes to mass issue
Yeah,
of items, is
yeah,
we tend to think of things in our own terms,
right.
but that's not how the mass of people
Yeah.
are going to respond to them.
Well,
And I can't blame them, because
no.
computers and cars I know nothing about.
Well, and when they're told 5 years, but okay,
Mm,
well, what's that based on? How old was the battery when you put it in? Because if it's already a couple years old, well, yeah, it's not going to
yeah,
go 5 years. The
yeah,
5 year battery life is based on a brand new battery coming from Duracell. Aimpoint is a
yeah,
big proponent of Duracell batteries for their optics.
yeah.
Brand new battery right from the factory at Duracell, put it in, and yeah, I would
Mhm,
think it'll go 5 years.
yeah.
But my wife bought a bunch of. I said, hey, I need some new 2032, so she bought some 2032 batteries off of Amazon, and God knows where they came from, and so I'm up here, and and one of my T1s decided that, oh yeah, battery's time to be changed. I go to change. I put one of
Mhm,
a fresh battery in, came from Amazon, nothing.
yep.
Put another one in, nothing. So I had to go to the pro shop, bought a Duracell, threw it in, optics back to running again. So even then, you depending on the quality of the batteries you buy, it's
Yeah.
that's a factor.
Yep. And we have to remember who the end users of the products are.
Yes.
And a lot of times they're not us.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I used to have a running joke with our communications commander. It's like, I don't need to know how the radio works. I
Yeah.
just need to know that when I press the button that it's going to work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as long as you make sure that happens, I don't care. Just go make it happen. That's all I need to know.
I used to tell my communicators, or actually, I jokingly refer to them as confusicators. I
Mhm.
said, it's all FM to me, effing magic. I just,
Uh, and it's, but we had a vendor come for something they were upgrading with the radio system, and he started trying to explain it to me, and the 911 director stopped him and said, "He doesn't care. He just wants to know if it works or not,
yeah, yeah,
and it needs to
yeah.
work when we press the button." And
That's
yeah, as far as I know, it's like magic little demon sending smoke signals and stuff up
yeah,
there and
exactly.
stuff, and it works.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
start asking me about the gun stuff, and
Well, yeah, exactly.
yeah. And it's funny when vendors would come and they'd be trying to sell something. I would say, well, McGillicuddy over there is our guy for that. Go talk to him, and if he wants it, I'll give him a check.
Yeah, yeah,
But don't explain it to me. Go
right,
talk to that guy over there that knows about this stuff.
yeah.
But we all get hung up on this stuff that because we know it, we think everybody knows it's going to do it the same way, and that's just not the
Not the
case.
case. Not the case. I remember. I don't know if you know Dean Caputo or know of Dean Caputo.
I've heard the name, but I don't know him.
Dean was a range master here at Gunsite. He's a retired sergeant detective out of Arcadia PD in California, and Dean is also one of the Colt armor instructors. And
Mhm,
with travel around like Wayne Dobbs used to when he worked for Colt, or Frank Moody.
mhm,
And Dean, anyways, for his department, he bought a number of aim point sights for his patrol rifles, micros. And I was, get him set up with some LaRue, QD mounts and stuff. And he's like, no, I don't want those, Freddie. And he goes, but they're good mounts. I go, oh, they're great mounts. He goes, I love LaRue mounts because you got to remember, I'm putting these on patrol rifles. I don't want these. If there's a QD lever on there, there's going to be pulling the optics off. Because I want to mount. So we got Daniel Defense mounts where they were like bolted on with like blue or red Loctite. I mean, it was not going to come off the gun.
Oh man, well, my agency that I started with adopted patrol rifles. Um, Bushmaster had the state contract, and so that's who we got.
Yeah.
And there were rifles were assigned to the patrol cars; they weren't assigned to the individual cops. Each car had a rifle, and I pulled a rifle out of a car to shoot a qual one day, and as I went to the prone, I noticed that the aperture was moved all the way over to the left. Somebody riding around in the car had been absent-mindedly playing with the optic and everything. And at that point in time, we had, like I said, it was a pool car, so you didn't have any choice. We had the AR-15s and we had Remington 870s in the car. And I made up my mind that very moment that I was stepping out of the car with the shotgun because I knew what I could do with the shotgun. I didn't know who had messed with the rifle.
You had no idea where that was going to impact. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I shot my qual. I passed the qual, but I didn't max it. And I
Yeah.
was so mad. And I went and re-zeroed the rifle afterwards. And, from then on, as part of the inspection, which I should have done, I looked at them and made sure that, okay, the aperture is at least close somewhere to the center.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you put witness marks on there, but even then it doesn't matter because they do a full rotation. It won't matter.
And if there's a way for a cop or a soldier or Marine to screw it up, they're going to screw it up.
They'll do it. I told the engineers at any point, the Swedish engineers, and I said, here's who you're building for. I said, if I take 2 Marines and I put them in a room with no doors or windows, I give each Marine a steel ball bearing, and I come back in an hour. One of the ball bearings is going to be missing. The other ball bearing broke, and neither Marine will know how it happened. I said, that's who you're building for.
Or one of the ball bearings is pregnant.
Yes. Yeah.
Deputy sheriffs and cops are about the same.
Yep.
The same way.
Yep.
Same way. Well, let's shift gears here and let's start talking about your association with Gunsite, some of the characters that have come through there.
Well, it was so I had been reading, of Jeff Cooper, of course, from college, and reading him in Guns and Ammo, and kind of following a lot of what he was teaching and everything, and so was a young lieutenant, in the Marine Corps. I had wanted to come to Gunsite, and then after I'd gone to the Marine Security Forces and everything, and that was 90 to 93 timeframe, and definitely wanted to come, but he had then sold Gunsite, and he had the falling out with he whose name shall not be mentioned. I won't call him the names that Bill Jeans calls him, but no, Richard G. And anyways, and of course they had the falling out, and Colonel Cooper was telling people not to come, and I had written to Colonel Cooper, a couple times, a couple letters, and he would respond, and I was, really kind of shocked that he would take time to write me back. Thought that was, pretty nice of him. Colonel Cooper, buzz by his Gunsite. Colonel Cooper's teaching again, and I'm like, I got to come sit at the foot of the master. So this was July of 2001. So this is literally, it was last week of July. So we're like a month away from 5 or 6 weeks away from 9/11. We didn't know that, but came, took a 250 pistol class with Colonel Cooper, was the range master, but Ed Stock, Ed Head, and Dave Harris were the coaches. But really Ed Stock was the range master. Jeff did all the lectures. He would ride behind the line on his trike and instill trichophobia amongst the students. And did the 250 class, shot very well. I interestingly enough, I shot it with a Glock 21. And the only thing I did was I had tritium sights, I had a minus connector, and Hart's recoil rod. Otherwise it was stock. And I won the man-on-man shoot off against a really, really solid shooter, Border Patrol agent, Tom Osborne. And Tom was running a 1911. It was a heated back-to-back. I mean, he'd win one, I'd win one. And you had to win by 2 in order to win. And and man, we were going back and forth, and finally I edged him out. And now I didn't hear Colonel Cooper say this, but my friends that with me, Gene Simmons, the Glock star, not the rock star, good friend of mine. I met him in Panama. He was American Red Cross worker. He was one of the top 10 Glock shooters in USPSA at one time. He was really, really good shooter, still is. And Gene said he heard Colonel Cooper say, after I won the man-on-man with a Glock 21 and shot very well in the course with it, he says, maybe there is something to those Glocks. and it had been a 9mm. I don't think he would have said that because it was a 45. I'm sure that's why he said it. And so I got to, of course, because I was a major at the time, and I had represented the regiment well, so to speak, and everything. It kind of built a good relationship with the colonel and myself and Janelle, and became close with them after. I came back for a gas match in 2002. I got of course, left headquarters Marine Corps July 2002, got promoted lieutenant colonel, came back to the West Coast, and we're in the workup phase for deploying to Kuwait, to OIF. And I came over for gas, and I, had a sit down with Colonel Cooper and Colonel Young, and within the unclassed realm that I shared with them kind of like, here's kind of what we're looking to do. And of course, they both loved that. Of course, Colonel Cooper really loved it. And then when I would come back for classes, whether I did a 350 pistol, and 223 carbine, and a 5.56 carbine, and when I'd come back, the Coopers had always had me over to their house for dinner one night, and I'd get him up to date on how the war was going and what was going on, and all that. And I think he really appreciated that. And one of the things with Colonel Cooper is he didn't suffer fools. If you couldn't keep up intellectually in a conversation, you wouldn't get invited back. Now, I don't know if he was the one who was inviting me back or if it was more Janelle. But and after the colonel had passed, and I would come, and I was invited on staff. You don't give Gunsite your resume and say, I want to teach here. You get invited on staff. And that's based on numerous range masters looking at you. Like I had Ed Stock for both my 250, 350. Giles Stock was really the range master, but Ed Stock was one of the coaches. But, Ed and Giles, of course, they were both range masters. So and then for carbine, it was Pat Rogers, both 223 and 5.56. I had Pat as a range master, and Ken Campbell was a coach in the 5.56 class. But anyways, they're evaluating you, and then they'll kind of go like, if you're interested, we'd like to have you come on staff. And you get invited on staff, and then you have to apprentice 3 classes, and that means on your own time. You don't get paid. And you come and you teach, and you get evaluated by range masters who did not recommend you. So in this case, Ed Stock had recommended me, so he could not evaluate me. And so it had to be, so Steve Hendricks was one of my evaluators. Dean Caputo was another. And interestingly enough, I only had to do 2. They didn't ask me to do a third. They were like, you're good. You don't need to do a third. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then, I would take leave and come and teach a class. They'd like you to do 2 a year, so I would take leave and come over and teach a class until I retired. And then they'd had full. After I retired, I still had full-time jobs, so I still was only able to come over a couple times a year and teach until I finally got semi-retired, and then I started teaching now. Anywhere from 1 to 3 classes a month, depending upon the need. The last 2 years, we've been very busy. And so I've been teaching a lot. And it's been an honor. I've told people this, that, and I've trained with a lot of really good instructors, outside of Gunsite, Larry Vickers, Kyle Lamb, John Farnham, Masada Oob, a lot of really good instructors, but, Ernest Langdon. But I'll tell you that still some of the best instructors that I've worked with are here at Gunsite, and you don't know their names. That's the interesting thing, is you would never know their names, because one, they teach here primarily because, they're not making a livelihood out of it. It's more post-retirement, or, and they do it for the love of the tradition that Gunsite has. But the beauty of it is, that as instructors, we get, if you're an instructor here, you get one free class here at Gunsite. So you can come here and take a class. That's good. And now, I went like 10 years where I only was able to take one class, and now I take advantage of it. The last 3 years, I've been able to take, one of the free classes a year. And, but I still try to take 2 to 3 classes with other instructors outside of Gunsite a year because I learn from them. I learn a lot from them. I blatantly take stuff from them. I give credit. I mean, I give them credit, but all the other instructors here do the same thing. And so there are a lot of times like we never work. There's a number of us that live locally, by locally I mean within 100 miles, and we teach a lot together because if there's extra classes and they call us, so we teach more than others. But there's a number of instructors that I may only work with once a year, and but they're taking classes outside of Gunsite, and they'll teach a particular part of the curriculum, and they'll use some verbiage or an analogy or something that really has some good, like, wow, where'd you pick that up from? Oh, I got it from so and so. Cool, and I'll adopt it. And so the benefit in that is Gunsite, while we're not big on the flavor of the month, hey, what's the new cool thing, let's teach that. No, we're very evolutionary in our curriculum, and I'm glad that it's that way, because that way we don't start teaching something that eventually goes, yeah, that was dog shit. No, we really spend time, and we have a range master conference where we'll sit down and debate it, and go like, is this how we want to teach this? And, what are the pros and cons? What are the reasons? And we'll discuss it thoroughly before we'll make the decision that we're going to start teaching that in the curriculum. Some things are easy, where it's like, yeah, that's a no-brainer. We just add it. But there's stuff that's like, it's a really kind of diametrically different than what we've been doing. And then we won't arbitrarily do it. We will actually take the time and discuss it and really think on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one point there too. Is you said range masters conference, so there's more than one range master. So you got all these people there. Not everybody's going to get what they want.
Yes.
Not everybody's going to get what they want in the time frame that they want it.
Yes.
Whereas, say, like, I'm a one-man show with my company.
Yeah.
As far as, well, I have the Magnificent Steve, so I can't say I'm a one-man show. But pretty much I decide the curriculum. And if I decide I want to change something, I just change it.
You just change it. Yeah. Yeah.
Or I come up with another class title and start doing something into that.
Yep.
I don't have to satisfy a group of people.
Yep.
And get them going. And so people will say, well, it's frozen in time or whatever. Well, I'm pretty certain that there was a lot of investment made in adopting a red sight or pistol mounted optic curriculum into the 250.
Yeah. Yeah.
And into the 350 and so forth. I met Ken Campbell at the Rogers Shooting School.
Yes.
When he was there as a student with some other Gunsite people. So it's not like it's, all right, this book was written in 1970. We got to stay true to it.
No. And Jeff evolved, but now Jeff was the same thing. He was not a flavor of the month guy.
Right.
He would spend a lot of time, and this is a Robbie Barkman word, cogitating on, on curriculum. And it was funny because, Robbie, would say that if, someone had something they knew they wanted to introduce, if they went directly to Jeff, they'd get pushback. They would bump heads, and it wouldn't happen. But as Robbie said, they would come to Robbie and they'd be like, and Robbie's like, no, you go to Janelle and you talk to Janelle about it. And sure enough, the next day Jeff would come in and goes, I've been thinking about this. and sure enough, they would begin at least talking about it and thinking about it, and then figuring out how they wanted to adopt it or adapt, whatever it was. And that was kind of the way to Jeff was through Janelle. Yeah. Janelle, quick aside, Janelle was a grand lady. Absolutely. I mean, Jeff called her the Duchess, because of her family history. There was an Earl who was, I think, a Norse, either Norwegian or Swedish Earl. And so he called her the Duchess, because of that. But she was just a grand lady, and she was my third grandmother. I had two wonderful grandmothers. She was my third one, and And if I was on the ranch teaching and I didn't go over and say hello, the next time I came, she would see me. Oh, Freddie. Oh, I heard you were here, a month ago. I was really disappointed you didn't come and see me. That was my ass chewing from Janelle. That was the kind of lady that Janelle was. And just, if you looked up Lady in Webster, her picture's there. I mean, she was just that era, that classiness, and I've seen pictures of Janelle and her. She was a very, very beautiful young lady, and I mean, just this class, just a very class. Yeah, great lady. And she was as mentally sharp up until the day she died. I mean, when she was 99, you swore she was 15 years younger. I mean, she was just amazing lady.
Excellent. You mentioned one of the stocks. Could you elaborate on the Stock brothers?
Well, the Stock brothers, what's great about this? So Jeff wrote in Cooper Commentaries one time that he declared 5 instructors here that had taught at Gunsite, at least at one point anyways, to what he called master instructors: Pat Rogers, Louis Auerbach, Ed and Giles Stock, and John Ganaway. And I've had the fortune of meeting John Ganaway via Jeff's daughter, Lindy. I was at a Robert K. Brown rendezvous at the NRA Whittington Center, and it was at the same time that the Teddy Roosevelt Society, which Jeff started, they would meet every year in that month in October around Teddy Roosevelt's birthday. And I happened to be there, saw Lindy, went, and she introduced me to John Ganaway. But I only got to meet John, but I definitely got to train under Pat a lot, Louis, and the Stock brothers. Now, the Stock brothers I only trained under here at Gunsite, Ed at my 250 class. And then because I got an E-ticket in the 250 class, I could have jumped to the 499. And, but I found out that Ed and Giles Stock were going to teach a 350 class together. And I said, that's not ever going to happen again because their schedules just won't align. I'm going to take that. And so I took the 350 class so I could train with Ed and Giles. And it was a great class. They were really, really phenomenal handgun instructors, really good. So I, really, Ed Stock, I kind of looked at as my mentor when, as an instructor here at Gunsite and handgun stuff. I have a number of mentors. Steve Hendricks is another as well, of course, but Ed was kind of that guy as I would try to emulate as an instructor. I'm probably more opinionated than Ed, but at least try to emulate him a little bit. And of course, Giles was a good instructor, and Louis was the master diagnostician. I mean, he just could diagnose shooters like unbelievably. It was just master at it. And with Louis, I had Louis come and do shotgun classes for my Marines, and I mean, they learned so much from him. Because we had just gone over to the new joint service shotgun, which was interesting. It was called the Joint Service Shotgun, the M110 Benellis. I think the Marine Corps, maybe the Rangers did adopt it, but I think the Marine Corps was the only one who really adopted it en masse. And and so Louis really put together, because for you to carry the shotgun downrange, all you had to do to carry a shotgun downrange in Iraq was shoot 20 rounds through it. And I'm like, you don't even know how to run the gun in 20 rounds. Right. There was no way I was going to let that happen. And so I put together, I got with Louis, did it, we did it. He had him come out to California and do MTTs and teach, the Marines really how to run those guns, and did a very good job. Another good instructor for the shotgun. So Louis, Bill Jeans, Louis, and Scotty Reitz, if you want to learn how to fight with a shotgun, or here at Gunsite in our 260 class, that's where you go. But you want to learn how to run in the shotgun. Rob Hott, just the mechanics of running a shotgun. Rob Hott's the guy. And then to fight with it, Louis and Scotty Reitz and here at Gunsite, Bill Jeans. Of course, Bill doesn't teach anymore, sadly. They were the guys that you went to learn how to fight with a shotgun. And not that Rob couldn't teach you, but his ditch is really learning how to run the gun. That interesting story with Louis one time. So Scotty Reeds, I just gone to work for Aimpoint. I literally had one of the first micros in the country. This is March of 2007. And I'm like, this has got to go on a shotgun. So I got a hold of Hans Vang, had him put a piece of pick rail on my 870, my Bangkok 870, put that optic on the gun. Didn't even get a chance to zero it before the class. And I show up and Scotty's like, Freddie, that optic isn't going to hold up to the recoil, blah, 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 blah. Well, and of course, I'm trying to get the zeroed, and it was a nightmare. I mean, it was trying to, not knowing enough about the optic, knowing enough about the optic on the shotgun, all at the time. I was holding up the class, and it was just a nightmare, right? So I finally get this thing freaking zeroed. And so now everything's kind of flowing all right. Scotty's teaching as a team. Scotty and Louis were teaching this class together. So Scotty would teach half the class at one part of the range, and Louis would teach the other half, and we'd kind of switch, So I'm over there with Louis, and Louis teaching transitions. And, Louis, we're at the 35-yard line, Louis, this, South African accent, well, some of you would have to probably transition at 15 yards. And some of you might be able to transition to a pistol at further distances, like myself here at 35 yards would probably be where I would 35 yards and closer would be where I would transition. And I stuck my hand up in the air and I'm like, Louis, yes, Colonel. Does that include rattlesnakes? And Louis looks at me and he goes, Colonel, with all due respect, fuck you and fuck Pat Rogers. And Lee is laughing. I'm laughing. And the whole class is looking at me like, holy shit, Louis going to kill him.
I have heard the rattlesnake story.
Yeah. But so we go to the night shoot. Scotty's got some steel out like 200 yards, right? And you would shoot. It was, I don't know, maybe it was 120 or one. I know it was past 100 yards. Maybe it wasn't 200 yards. And we're shooting slugs. She would shoot 2 standing, 2 kneeling, 2 prone. And I've got the micro on. And when I rang steel, 222, and Scotty looks at me and he goes, Freddie, I want 2 of those for LAPD Metro now. I'm like, okay, got it. Yeah, so that I made Scotty a believer in the micro in that class.
I went to Shotgun 260 at Gunsite. It's the only time I've been out there, and I've told this story I think on air before. I'm running an 870p with the Trigicon sights that replace the rifle sights, and the steel targets. My front sight is bigger than the steel.
Yeah.
And since then, I have set up a Beretta 1301 with an aim point on it. Yeah. And I'm curious. I want to run some of those courses of fire again with that aim point, see what the difference is.
It's so easy. It's cheating, Lee. It's
yeah.
So cheating.
Yeah. And I was stubborn. I have an 870 with MMC ghost ring sights in the truck, but no, I got out with this one. This is what I'm going to do the class with.
Yep.
And so I want to go. I want to run it twice. I want to go run it with my ghost ring sight shotgun, and I want to run it with the aim point, see what the difference is.
Well, sadly, we ended up having to break the 260 shotgun down from 5 days to 3 because just people have a hard time, controlling the recoil and getting beat up. And some of the instructors have finally adopted the reverse weaver, is basically what Rob Hott teaches, is kind of, reverse isometric push-pull, stretching the gun. And that helps because those people that, the old school method of like, stepping in tight in your shoulder. I mean, it would just beat the snot out of you. And I had Rob do a couple classes. I brought some of my Marines up to do a class with Rob Hott. He was teaching up in Pareto, and it was interesting. So I had they were going like, hey, we got the new Joint Service biological, chemical warfare suit, and if you want your unit to test it for us, because they have to do these tests with it, requiring the Marines to wear them like all day, training them, all that. And we'll give your unit like $50,000. You can spend it whatever you want. I'm like, done.
Yeah.
Sign me up. And so we went up there. We all had to wear the suits, and with that money, I was able to pay the tuition, to do the shotgun class with Rob Hott, and I had a couple small statured Marines in the class, and we shot like 500 or 600 rounds in 2 days, and none of them had bruises on their shoulders because of that full reverse, isometric push pull, and yeah, that technique works.
We had a couple. I'm not sure if they were married or not, but they were there as a couple in the class. And the female half of the couple was shooting an 870 with an overfolder metal stock on it. And of course, you can't get the proper cheek weld on that. And if you don't have the proper cheek weld, it's getting a running start on your cheek.
Oh God.
And by the end of day 2, she had like a grapefruit size thing on her cheek. Well, the whole class when we were doing the night shoot, we left the range.
You
all
froze up.
All right, the whole class, we did our day long at the range, and we all went to a restaurant to eat dinner with each other before we went back to do the night shoot. And the wait staff at the restaurant tried to do an intervention and sneak her out of the restaurant to get her away from this abusive guy, because they thought that the bruising on her face was from it. And I'm sitting there going, oh, there's some abuse taking place here, but it's not because he's doing that. It's because he gave her that shotgun.
Oh man. Well, when I was with the Marine Security Forces down in Panama, we had a couple of posts that we had to stand, and because of the close confined quarters, we had taken Mossberg 590s, which was our shotguns at the time, which are great shotguns. Great, those are good shotguns. But we put got to remember this was 1993, and so Tacstar was like what you got, and so we had Tacstar pistol grip and foregrip on these shotguns, and they look really cool, right? So I get there, I'm the new platoon commander, and I'm a junior captain because I had an 80-man platoon. It was a huge platoon, and I see these shotguns are on posts, and I'm like, yeah, they're pretty cool. I said, so have you guys ever fired those? Trained with them out on the range? They're like, no, sir. We only stand posts with them. I'm like, no, that ain't gonna happen. So, I arrange, for the next training evolution, to get, standard stock 590s out on the post. We get those there for training. And I'm like, look, guys, birdshot, you're not gonna have a problem. And so we start running double odd buck or slug. You're gonna have to, really push that out there and use a lot of bicep to keep it from coming back. You're gonna eat it. And so I demonstrate it. And they're like, cool. So the Marines start training. Well, I had a couple of, smaller male Marines that, boom, crack tooth. It's like, oh shit. So he goes down to dental. All right. A couple of Marines later, boom, crack tooth. Down to dental he goes. And at that point, all the Marines are like, yeah, we're done carrying that thing on post. We're done. And so they quickly realized that, when they do those shit in the movies, they're shooting like blanks,
Yeah.
Try double odd buck or slug, ain't gonna work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Earlier you mentioned that your Marines got 20 rounds, and now you can go carry this and the thing. 5 rounds in the police academy. 5 rounds.
You're gonna get someone killed.
And when I made it up to field training officer, and one of my jobs was to go around and inspect weapons and stuff in the vehicles and stuff, I would find shotguns with the shotgun shells loaded in backwards and everything. And there were people riding around.
Yeah.
And so you got a guy or a gal that they don't know enough about the shotgun to properly load the ammo in the right direction in it.
Yep.
But they're qualified to get out and use this weapon in public.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. It's scary. I mean, so every time I hear this, well, the only, law enforcement and military should be the only ones with those guns. And I'm like, you don't know how poorly trained they are.
Part of my qualification when I get to run it the way I want to run it is if you don't know how to load the shotgun correctly, you failed the qualification.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, we use the term gun box ready, which is the same as cruiser ready in other places. Yeah. And I'll tell them to load the shotgun to gun box ready to start the course of fire. And if they can't do that, you're not qualified to carry that weapon.
Absolutely.
And at some point in time during the usage of the shotgun, they have to unload it on command. And if that unload is racking the shells out, you're not qualified to use that
You're
weapon.
qualified to carry it.
I don't care what your score on the paper is, you're not qualified.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But going
You,
back to 260, so
Hmm.
it went from 5 days to 3, but to make it equivalent to the old 260, you do shotgun tactical problems. So, so if you wanted the full 5 days where you did the simulators and everything, then you do the 260 and then the SATP shotgun, SATP, so throw that out. So if you want to come back to do that, that's what you'd have to do. To make it 5 days, you'd have to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they went to the 3 days because just a lot of people just were getting beat up by it. And Bill Jeans told a really funny story about how when they first started doing the shotgun program, and Robbie talked about how it came about, and but Bill says when he started teaching, he says these people would come and they would shoot the shotgun, and their shoulders were really sore, so someone would wear those shoulder buffs, the competition shooters. And he said that one of the students, and I can't remember if it was a male or a female student, came back the next day and he's running the gun, and and everybody's looking at him like, how come your shoulder doesn't hurt? He goes, well, I went to the store and I bought a bunch of super absorbent maxi pads. And he peeled off the backs and he would put it on his t-shirt and put his shirt over it. He goes, Gene said that night, he said the whole class went and bought all these super absorbent maxi pads to put under their shirt by their shoulder. But it worked. It worked. So that was the old school, suck it in your shoulder.
Yeah. But if you mount the shotgun correctly, you don't have a recoil problem.
No, you don't. No.
Yeah, Bill Jeans is a name that is almost universally revered amongst knowing firearms instructors, but he's not well known to the general firearms public. Could you tell us some more about Bill Jeans?
Well, Bill's background, he was actually an 08 artilleryman, and he was in Quezon during the siege. Lost 3 of his best friends there, and he'll tear up talking about him. Bill wears his emotions on his sleeves. I think he's always been that way, but just a great man. So after Vietnam, became a police officer in a town that's next to Sacramento. What the hell is it? It begins with a C, and I can't think of the Clovis, California, and did a 20+ year career there, and of course started coming to Gunsite and got invited on staff, and he was an instructor here at Gunsite. And then Jeff would go through training directors or operations managers fairly quickly. I could see where working for Jeff could be, a challenge. It was Jeff's personality. And I have great love and respect for Jeff, but he could be a difficult person, I'm sure, to work for. He hired Bill. Bill moved over, bought a 40-acre parcel here at Raven Guard, built a house, and worked for Jeff for a few years before then Jeff ended up selling to Richard G. And Bill was not happy about that. Did not enjoy working for G, and was upset that Jeff kind of, as he said, felt like Jeff kind of bailed on him, really, because he came over to work for Jeff, not G. But after Jerry McCown, I think, tells that story pretty well about the falling out there, and Bill went on the road, started teaching, and did well, did very well, out there, earning a good reputation outside of Gunsite as an instructor. And so I met Bill through a friend of mine matter of fact, I met that guy in the 350 shoot off. He and I were in the shoot off. I won the shoot off, won the man-on-man in my 350, got another e-ticket. He, has the distinction of being the first place loser but a good guy. And he introduced me to Bill Jeans. And so after I started working for Aimpoint, had Bill come on board as pro staff, and he worked for me as a pro staff member at military shows. I did he would teach classes in Kern County, California, and I would go up, and Bill was always nice about, I'd shoot the class, but Bill would give me the time to do, product demos, Aimpoint product demos and stuff during the class. And, so I got very close with Bill, and just a great human being. Very, very passionate about our republic, passionate about our Constitution, passionate about, our civil rights. Just a good man.
Yeah. You've mentioned Scotty Reitz a little bit previously. What about Reitz and Mudgett? Can you tell us?
Well, both Scotty and Larry, of course, were Metro D platoon, which everybody knows is LAPD SWAT, but it's really LAPD Metro D platoon is the correct title. And Scotty was one of the younger guys. So John Helms, Larry Mudgett, I think they were like the second generation guys on LAPD Metro, and Scotty would have been probably like near, maybe third gen, or really maybe the tail end of second gen, really. And interestingly enough, when the Marine Corps stood up the Marine Expeditionary Unit Special Operation Capables, with the Force Reconnaissance community doing the extraneous hostage rescue stuff, they leaned on LAPD Metro D platoon to stand up the first Special Operations Training Group there at Camp Pendleton. And they, I know it was Scotty, I know it was Larry, I think also John Helms. They came down and they lived down there for 6 months training the Force Reconnaissance community on close quarter battle, all CQB techniques and everything. And so when Scotty started up International Training Studios, ITTS, and he would train civilians and law enforcement and Hollywood actors for, there at it's Eagle's Nest. It's a shooting range in the Los Angeles National Forest, a public shooting range in the Los Angeles National Forest, but he has a portion of it that's his, that he's been leasing long term, and trains a lot of people there. Everybody refers to him as Uncle Scotty, and he's got some interesting picadillos himself, where everybody jokes about Uncle Scotty, because it doesn't matter, he'll have if there's an optic on a gun and he has a way to put 90-mile-an-hour tape on and masking tape on, and he's got it masking taped. If there's something on a holster, he'll have it masking taped to his leg, or so. It's hilarious how he uses masking tape for everything. And we all kind of joke about it, but he is again, another, some people, he's old school, but I'll tell you what, that dude's been there, done that more times than anybody. And he knows what works, what doesn't work. I remember when I took the shotgun class from him, a lot of people, they like to run the brass down on their side saddle. And Scotty runs all brass up, or sometimes they'll run like, buck down and slug up, or vice versa. Yeah. And when I was taking the class, I noticed Scotty ran all of his brass up. And so I asked him, and he told the whole class, but he says, yeah, so during the Rodney King riots, we're running around, gunning with the shotguns, and all of us at that time were running brass down because it was quicker to, load. He goes, and we would be, we'd get ready to load, and like, there's no shotgun shells because they had all worked themselves loose and fell out. He goes, and that's when we changed. We started running brass up, because that prevented that from happening. He goes, it takes a little longer, but at least you got the rounds there when you do it. Yeah.
Sure is better than fast.
Yes. Yeah.
If I have to pick between the two, I'm going to pick sure.
Yep. It's one thing when you're shooting a course of fire in a competition. Okay. Yeah. They're not going to come loose probably in the short span that you're doing that. But when you're, running, chasing people, jumping fences, doing real stuff, whole different perspective.
Yeah, I will take a moment here and give a plug to the Aridus Industries quick detach carrier.
Yeah.
You could probably trust carrying brass down in it, but in none of the Velcro elastic side saddles
Yeah, the
would
old
I go
plastic
breast
tack
down.
stars or any of those. No,
Yeah, none of that would I go breast down, for precisely that reason. And matter of fact, I had, I think it was an S-Tac brand, uh, Velcro elastic side saddle,
yeah,
and it was worn enough that it was really fast getting the loads out. And when I was at 260, um, I went to Walmart the night before we did our school drills and stuff to get something else. And I was walking through sporting goods and I noticed they had some Winchester AAA hull
yeah.
birdshot in there. And I was having some problems with the birdshot that I had sticking in my chamber. And so I grabbed a box of those and I take those out and I'm so happy to go into school drill because these things are so slick. And I went to grab a round and it right over my head. That's like, yeah, those are going away.
Yep.
And so I have the Vang. Even if it's an elastic side saddle on one of mine, it's a Vang.
Yep. So
But I've been trying to switch over to the Aridus
yeah,
as I can as they become available and
yeah.
everything.
Adam Roth makes good stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anything about Mr. Mudgett?
Oh, Larry, I was really interesting. Again, my 350 class. I had Giles, Ed, Stock, and Larry Mudgett. You want to talk about? I knew of Larry, but I didn't know, and I didn't know Larry was going to be one of the coaches because you don't really know who they are typically. And I was like, whoa, this is like I'm in the presence of like legacy right here. And Larry is one of the nicest guys, just a true gentleman, a true gentleman in our industry. And I would encourage anybody to get a chance to train with Larry, do that. And his experience base and knowledge base, just unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of going out with Wayne Dobbs, Daryl Bolke, John Holshin,
Yeah.
John Hearn.
I wish I known you guys
yeah.
were going. I'd have gone with you just to go be with Larry.
Oh man, that was a fun class. That was,
bet.
because you had Larry, which is one of the preeminent people in this business doing this stuff, but then the other students, man, it was fun to get up and start class each morning at breakfast. And then we would go to class.
Yeah.
And then we would come back to the hotel and have class again. It was a very great learning experience.
Just to sit in that room and just listen to one. You got a whole bunch of great people with a wealth of experience and knowledge of their own. But to be there, it's the same way.
And it was cool to get his insight on a lot of stuff that we kind of historically knew, like the events.
Yes.
But to get his insight from being there, or the behind the scenes political machinations of the organization.
Yeah.
And how this goes. And
really, because Larry told the story of when he and John Helms used the Harry's technique in that one rescue. And Larry, of course, tell it in a way you're just dying laughing. And John is much more somber about it. When John tells a story, it's just, so much more serious, but Larry tells it, you're just rolling laughing about the whole thing.
I love some of the behind the scenes LAPD stories he told us. And, it's funny. There was a TV series years ago called Homicide: Life on the Streets. It was about the Baltimore PD homicide unit. And the same guy who wrote that wrote the series The Wire.
Yes. Okay.
For HBO. And there was a line in the book for which the TV series The Homicide was based on. So logic and critical thinking are rarely the engines that propel a police department forward. And you can apply that to so many organizations.
You can apply that to the military, no problem.
And I teach college classes part-time, and I was having a discussion with another faculty member today about something going on. And I said, you have to remember, this institution and all institutions of learning as far as on the college level are institutions of higher education, not higher thinking. Yes. So don't confuse the two.
There is a difference. Higher institutions and higher thinking, two different.
Yeah. Higher learning, higher thinking, not the same thing. Yeah. When we were talking before the show, you mentioned John Farnham.
John is John and Vicky are dear friends. And I met John through Gary Greco, because Gary hosted John at Fort Meade when I was, headquarters Marine Corps, and I was going up. And so I did John's advanced pistol class. And so after OIF 1, we're back, we're starting to do the workup for OF2, because we're going back in, we're going to relieve the army in my brain fading on me now, Al Assad province. And so I said, you know what, we need to reach the officers and staff NCOs to get them good pistol training. One, because that's the sidearm, that's what they carry predominantly, but I want to expose them to what real firearms training can be like. And so I reached out to John, brought John in, and he and Vicky came, and he did probably, I want to say it was like, hosted him like 4 or 5 times. And it opened up a lot of eyes, because then I would always end it with like, okay, so now you understand the difference between what we've been getting trained as Marines, the standard, range stuff, between now fighting with firearms, and so that led them to understand that I say, we need to be doing this with the rifles too. And they're like, and the shotguns. And then that got them understanding that, there was more to firearms training than what they'd been exposed to previously. And so, some people would complain like, well, why are we spending all that money to, train people with pistols? Because we don't fight wars with pistols. And I'm like, it's not so much about fighting the war with the pistol as much as teaching them that they've got to fight the war with their minds. And they need to understand that there is a level of training that they've received, and it's not the level of training they need. And that would open the door for them, being leaders, to then start getting their Marines trained for, better training for carbine and shotgun and all of those things. And it helped. It did open those. It started that momentum to do that. And so John and Vicky, of course, became dear friends. And I'll tell you an interesting story. Chris Bourne, who I talked about earlier. Now, Chris is promoted now. We were majors together at Marine Forces Pacific Command, but he was senior to me by a few years. So he got promoted to Lieutenant Colonel right before he left there. I was 3 years behind him in grade, so it was another 3 years before I got promoted. But he and I went into both Ethiopia and Eritrea, Africa, together a couple of times, and we traveled, to some very interesting places together. Chris gets promoted. He becomes, I think, the recruit regiment commander for Marine Corps Recruit Depots, Parris Island. And that's where, I think still this time, I think all the female enlisted recruits go through Parris Island still. I don't think they're putting them through San Diego yet, or if they intend to. All that's changing since Obama, but Chris calls me and he says, hey, you know anybody that would be really good about teaching my primary marksmanship instructors on how to teach females? And I said, well, what's going on? He says, well, he goes, we have, I want to say it was like an 80% pass rate for male recruits, but only like a 40% pass rate for female recruits on the known distance qual course for the rifle. And he said, all my instructors are male. And he goes, I know we can do better. And so I remember, talking with John and Vicky, telling me about how she'd been brought to the FBI Academy to teach their instructors on how to teach females. So I reached out to John and Vicky, and then I put them and Vicky in touch with Chris, and she went and taught, I think, 2 different classes for them down there. And the rate at which the females recruits passed after she did the training matched that of the males after that. And a lot of factors involve both how men and women communicate differently, but there's just this whole aspect of understanding just human anatomy. And some of this I picked up from Louis, but Vicky really emphasized as well, is that male female anatomy. I know it's going to be shocking for our audience, but yes, we're different. Okay, contrary to what the woke crowd is telling us, we are different. And if you have a female whose hip bones are the same height as a male, the male is still going to be 3 to 4 inches taller because her torsos are longer, and that changes center of gravity differently for men and for women. And the other thing is upper body strength for women is not the equal of males. It's a fact. It's just how it is. And because their legs theoretically are longer because they have shorter torsos, their center of gravity is different. And so one of the ways, Vicky did a great job of explaining male Marines about, okay, this is how you have to communicate with women. This is how they receive and process information. So you got to communicate differently with them. And then also physically they're different, which means like, here, let me give you a rifle, and now I'm going to hang. And she'd have like a 5-pound weight with a piece of string hanging on the end of their barrel. And that's how it feels for that female recruit to hold that rifle. And this is why they would lean back and, be completely off balance because their center of gravity was different. And then last, she would talk about, bra straps. If most of the female recruits, I believe, probably wear sports bras, but if they weren't, they were wearing bras that had bra straps. Guess where that adjustment strap would be? Right where the butt of the rifle would be. And now they're feeling that every time the gun recoils, especially shotguns. And just all little things like that. And I'm sure there was more that she taught them, but those are the takeaways that I remember. And she opened up the eyes of a lot of male instructors to understand that this, when we're working with females as instructors, it's different, and we have to understand that and be cognizant of it.
Yep. You mentioned you had a good Travis Haley story.
Okay, so it's funny. I've known Travis since 2008 or 9. So I knew Travis when he had a little company in Hawaii called Simply Dynamics, and he was still Marine Corps Reserve Force, 4th Force, and his wife at the time, she was a Navy doctor and dermatologist. And so I get this email from Travis saying, "Hey, you don't know me." He had already done the Blackwater thing, but nobody really knew him yet, and he says, "Hey, I've been doing a lot of training with HPD, and that new Aimpoint Micro looks like that'd be a really great optic." And I'd already talked with Mark LaRue about making a mount for it for carbines. And I said, "Yeah, okay, Travis." So I sent him one, and he starts working with it, and then Travis and I communicate some more. So Travis he did at least, I'm pretty sure he did 2 military shows for me as pro staff. So actually Travis worked for me as pro staff before Travis became Travis. And the last one he worked for me, he said that, he goes, "Yeah, Rich Fitzpatrick and I are putting together a training company." Rich Fitzpatrick owns Magpul. And Rich was a 1st Recon Marine. And Travis had been first recon, then did 2nd Force, and then got out, went to 4th Force in reserves. But so when he stood up Magpul Dynamics, Chris Costa, Travis says to me, he goes, "Hey, Freddie, we're going to make these training videos. It's going to be like cutting edge, best quality video. It's not going to be like these cheap videos that, we'd seen in the industry prior, Yeah, because when he first mentioned to me, I'm like, "Really, Travis, videos, really?" And he's like, "No, you don't get it. It's going to be really high quality." And he goes, "We're going to shoot a carbine video in Virginia. Hey, do you want to be in it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to be in it, but I got to be at this military unit that week. I can't be there, but I'll send Kyle Harth, Kyle was Army SF, worked for me at Aimpoint. Great. Kyle's like brother, great guy. And John Enlow, John Boy from Aimpoint. He's the Maytag repairman of Aimpoint sites in the U.S. So if you watch that DVD, you'll see both Kyle and John in there. And so they went and were in the video. And that video, Travis and Chris took off from there and went on to do good things. And Travis, through Jim Fuller, formerly Rifle Dynamics, he's doing stuff with Travis, and he's got a shop building AKs there in Travis's building. And last time I saw Travis, we were talking about just what he's doing currently. He's doing extremely well with his nylon gear and some stuff he's doing with video simulators and training and stuff. And you know, Travis is really, really happy for him. He's doing really good stuff there.
You know, those videos became so mainstream in their
Oh, yeah.
day that I bought a Colt 6920 Magpul edition,
Yeah.
and the DVD was included with the rifle. So how many people bought those rifles and then, oh, here's this training DVD, and a lot of people in the industry give those videos credit for bringing training mainstream.
Yeah, he really did. He and Chris kind of knocked that one out of the park when they did that, you know. Yeah.
We are at about an hour and a half, and I know there was a couple other names we wanted to mention, but you also want to talk about metal finishes. Do you want to talk about the other names? Or you want to talk about metal finishes?
We may be getting a little too long. We could
Uh,
save that for another show if you want, or we could
Okay.
talk about it now. Your call, my brother.
Your choice. Would you? We haven't talked about Bob Brown, and we haven't talked about LaRue. Those are the other two names that you mentioned.
We
And
could
then
we could save those for another show, and that way, you know, we won't bore people and lose people. You know, all I care about is just more listeners than John Hearn. That's all I care about.
well, you know, we've probably already succeeded with that.
That'll bump me up above D to C level then.
I'm just going to send him a message like you got 2 Easter eggs, and then just leave it at that. So yeah, let's do another episode where we talk about metal finishes and maybe go back because I know you want to talk some about Gary Greco and as well. And I got plenty of time, but I know you got an engagement you got to get to.
Yeah, I do.
And,
I do have to kind of head out to that event with those Marines, so I got to get going.
Yeah. All right. Well, once again, I thank you for all of the efforts you've been putting in to help line up some of the great guests that we've been getting.
Yeah. I'll try to get you a few more. If you want, I can reach out to John and Vicky Farnham. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
I know John and Vicky, but if you would like to grease the skids there a little bit too, and maybe, sure. You know, it's been fun, you know, talking to a lot of the people back that were when all this stuff was forming and everything, and then they're still involved today. And I just want to make sure we get all this documented and have it as a place to go. And I can tell you that, you know, my travels around the gun community, I'm starting to hear from, you know, like in my class this past weekend, students are bringing up stuff they heard in the episodes and stuff. And it's fun to see that it is serving its intended purpose of getting into that level.
I mean, that's a lot of, you know, time on your effort on your part to put it all together, but I'm really glad you are, because you're capturing a lot of history. And if we don't, and I said this so many times, if we don't capture this, it's gone. I mean, the stories that Robbie would tell me, and I'm just, I wish I could, you know, film this, because, you know, I won't be able to repeat them as well as he tells them. He's one of those guys that's just a great storyteller. Like he and Pat Rogers, you know, just phenomenal storytellers.
Yeah, of course, I'm just sitting in my kitchen having a conversation. It's not like it's a whole lot of work going on here. So, I tell people I'm just having phone calls and y'all get to listen in. That's what the show is. That's what the show is.
Well, you're doing it well. You're doing it well, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. And again, thank you for all the behind the scenes help that you've been, and thank you for coming on tonight.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for hosting me.
Thank you. And to the audience, we know that your number one important asset is your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.